On Larry King Now, Oscar nominee Bruce Dern.
I was lucky enough so far to work for 6 genius directors. Kazan, Hitchcock, a kid named Douglas Trumbull, Alexander Payne, Quentin Tarantino, and Francis Coppola. Well, I would say in my lifetime, I've always respected people that had the ability to get done.
Your character in Hateful Eight was wild.
General, yeah. We started in Telluride and shot in that little house, which was at 10,000 feet. And later in the movie, we had to come back to Hollywood to shoot a lot of the interiors of the cabin because Sam and others had trouble in the long speeches completing a sentence because you can't get your breath. It's 10,000 feet.
Plus, best decade of your life.
Well, they say it's supposed to be the 50s for us, but I like this decade.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest, one of my favorites, Oscar, BAFTA, Golden Globe, and Emmy-nominated actor Bruce Dern. He boasts a mind-boggling list of credits, including Nebraska, Hateful Eight, which is a great movie, Coming Home, The Burbs, The Wild Angels, The Great Gatsby, Family Plot, and The Cowboys, as well as about 150 others. He stars as Joe Kennedy in Chappaquiddick, about that tragic historical incident. Chappaquiddick is in theaters April 6th. He plays Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family. You've had so many. You've got 12 projects that you're shooting now or coming out, right?
Right.
You're 81 years old.
Right.
Why don't you stop?
I still run every day. I compete in my age group, guys 80 to 85 at 800 meters or 1,500 meters as a runner. That's all I ever did. The only time I ever played baseball, actually, was in you remember the Broadway Show League in New York? Every play on Broadway had a baseball team in the Summer League. That's how I met Elliott Gould and Joey Walsh.
What play were you in?
I was in Sweet Birdie Youth with Paul Newman, Geraldine Page. I was in Shadow of a Gunman, and I was a member of the Actors Studio. And when any of us weren't playing in a play, we played for the Actors Studio. Paul Newman was my first baseman. Elliott Gould was my catcher.
And what were you?
I was center fielder. I was very good.
Well, tell me about Chappaquiddick. You played Joe Kennedy.
Right.
Do we learn a lot in Chappaquiddick that we don't know?
Well, it depends what you read and what you believed or so forth and so on. What this really takes place is about the day before, the day of, and the 2 or 3 days after the incident.
And they tried some sort of cover-up?
Well, yeah, there is a scene in the movie where he comes to me, Teddy, and Joe Kennedy had 4 strokes.
I know.
And so he was kind of feeble, but he heard everything that people said. Well, every goddamn thing people said. And he got it. He just couldn't deliver well, and you'll see that in the movie. But Teddy said, "Dad, there's been an accident," so forth and so on. You'll see the scene, and I just don't know what to do. And he starts crying, and I just say, "Alibi." The toughest thing about the movie, he did not report it until 8 the next morning because they wanted to beat the press.
Does the movie make something heroic about him?
No.
Or, no, it does not.
Nor does he come out. It paints it just the way it happened. And
so how many days were you on the set?
I was there a week.
Did they send you the script? Did you have to like the script, or was it easy for you?
It was easy for me. What was hard was the man himself was one of the more, well, I would say in my lifetime, I've always respected people that had the ability to get done. And Joe Kennedy got
Boy, did he.
And he was kind of, I've always, I've always admired men and women who accomplished that. The only time I would have ever voted for president, I would have voted for Barbara Jordan in 1976 for a woman. And the reason I say that is because my you know, godfather and around the house all the time. My dad's law partner was Adlai Stevenson, and he came to see me on Broadway in my first play, which was Shadow of a Gunman.
I love that.
And then I did Sweet Bird of Youth right after that. And he took me and he wanted me to know, because my people were passing away by then, how proud they would have been of me, you know, to be finally in a Broadway play, because they didn't want me to go. And I said, can I ask you a question? What was it like when you ran in 1952 against Eisenhower the first time? He said, well, I would say, and much more educatedly than I'm speaking, I would say that I felt I came in on a pretty damn white horse, but I ran against a guy who couldn't be beat. He just won the war, he was a great golfer, he was forthright, he was God-fearing, and he was a great politician, and honest and forthright. And I said, then why did you come back again in '56? Well, they asked me, they said, you're the lion of the party, and so forth and so on. And he leaned, we were Downies, and he leaned across the table and grabbed my wrist like this. And he started to get tears in his eyes. I said, what's the matter? He said, somehow, in 1956, when I came in, that horse was a lot grayer. And I realized it's not for me. And he grabbed my wrist and he said, I want you to make me a promise. You will never, ever vote for that office until you see someone on a white horse.
I love that, Lacey. The most twinkling blue eyes. Our guest is the legendary, incredible actor Bruce Dern, and you can tell it's hard to draw him out. We're taking a look at his work with Hitchcock and Tarantino. After the break, stay with us. Chappaquiddick is coming soon. We're back with Bruce Dern, an amazing actor, an incredible guy, and still doing it. 12 projects, over 160 movies. You worked with Hitchcock. What was that like? You did Alfred Hitchcock Presents. You were in Marnie and in Family Plot, his last movie.
Right. And what he was like was he was, I've always said that I was lucky enough so far to work for 6 genius directors. Kazan, who I began under contract to, Hitchcock, a kid named Douglas Trumbull, who was you know, the silent
Hollywood,
running that I did and others, and he won the Oscar for 2001 when he was 22 years old, and for special effects. Alexander Payne, Quentin Tarantino, and Francis Coppola. And everybody always says, well, why do you call them geniuses? I said, because there is nobody on the set, nobody, who works on the crew, who isn't invited daily to go up to any one of those men and say, what is my exact job, sir, in this shot? And they'll tell you. Even if you're way up on a flyway or you're the craft service or whatever it is. Hitchcock was also funny.
He was?
Yeah. And he was a bigger man than people think. His problem was he would not sit. He couldn't get up in the tall director's chair, so he had in the little chair like this. And at the end of the first day, he said to the first AD, he said, I like a word with the crew, if I might have. And he said, yes. So I'm not going to miss the chance to sit next to the guy for 10 weeks. So I sat in my chair the next day. He was so big in the neck, he couldn't turn to look at you. So he just talked forward to everybody. And he started to get up out of a little chair, and the chair went with him because his hips were sticking out the holes of the side. And all he said to me out loud was, he said, Bruce, a hand, please. So I grabbed the legs, and he walked away from me. And he went to the crew, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to thank you for quite a wonderful first day. And they all applauded, and we're on the way to the Dodger game. You know, they wanted out of there. And he said, personally, so they all kind of stopped, 78 people on a set at Universal, and this is 1975, and he's got a Jarvik heart. He had the number 7 of the Jarvik hearts. And he says, 1 minute. And he started walking around, and he walked around, shook the hand, and told every single individual, one by one, by their first name after one day. And there's nobody talking in his ear, looking at a piece of paper. And another thing he did that was pure Hitchcock that's great was Karen Black was in the movie with me. And she was a wonderful actress. And it was her first day. She came, she said, "Hi, Mr. Hitchcock, I'm so glad that you're having me here," and everything, and Bruce. And he said, "All right, Karen, you go to your mark, you're ready for the scene." All she had to do was walk into a room like this, a kitchen, open and close 7 cupboard doors. That's it. Cut. So she did it. And he said, "Cut, thank you very much, Karen. Now we're over here, boys." So everybody starts moving equipment this way. And Karen raises her hand like she's in the 4th grade. And she says, but Mr. Hitchcock, it's my first day and I'm kind of intimidated and I'd really like another. "Why?" And she said, "Because I'd just like to do it one more time. Could I please?" He said, "All right, go to your mark." She went to her mark. "Go." And she walked around and did the exact same thing. He said, "Thank you, Karen." And then said, "Okay, boys, we're over here." And she comes up and she said, "But Mr. Hitchcock, you never turned the camera on." And he said, "That's right, Karen." She said, "Why?" "Because I have the one I want."
What was Quentin Tarantino like to work with?
He and Alexander.
I love him.
Alexander did Nebraska. Quentin did the Hateful Eight. And I think the thing that I admire most about both those guys is their reverence for what went before. And they have a respect for the history of movies and how they're there where they are and have the opportunity. I don't see that much anymore.
Your character in Hateful Eight was wild. That guy in that chair.
General, yeah. I was in the chair. I never moved.
Yeah, that's right. The whole movie, you were in the chair.
Until he blew me out of it. But I mean, it was, and it was a long time. We started in Telluride, which was 8,900 feet, and shot in that little house, which was at 10,000 feet. And later in the movie, we had to come back to Hollywood to shoot a lot of the interiors of the cabin for 2 months because Sam and others had trouble in the long speeches completing a sentence because you can't get your breath. It's 10,000 feet. So, you know, you'd be in, and Sam had the long speech.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, right. And so we had to come back and do it on the stage. So what do they do? They make the stage here 22 degrees so they can see our breath.
You've been nominated for Oscars, Emmys, Golden Globes, and BAFTAs, never won.
Actually, my daughter, Laura, her mother, Diane Ladd, and myself, I think are the only family that all have stars on Hollywood Boulevard. Other families, but never mother, father, child. And Laura's got game, and the mother's got game.
Coming up, we'll talk about fan encounters, secret talents, and the upside of aging with Bruce Dern. We'll be right back. We're back with the great Bruce Dern. You'll see him in Chappaquiddick in theaters April 6th. I'm 84, you're 81. I'm trying to think about, other than it's better than the alternative, is there any upside to aging?
Well, there is for me. A couple of reasons. First of all, as a runner, as I turned 81, I'm the younger guy in my 5-year age group, 80 to 85. When you get to be 84 and 85, then you're racing against the 80-year-old guys. So that gives me an advantage. And I don't look backward well. I mean, I love looking back that way, but not at my own stuff and everything. I'm always about the bear went over the mountain, and what do you think he saw? Well, what's still there to do? What's, you know, and don't you like that? Don't you still?
Yeah. Do you think about dying?
No.
I fear it.
Do you really?
I don't think there's anything else. Do you think there's something else?
No way. Do I think there's people up there? Absolutely not.
No.
You know, and when people say, "Oh, no, they come down, we saw them," oh, please.
We'll play a little game of If You Only Knew. What's your guilty pleasure?
Gambling on sports gambling.
Sports gambling.
Yeah, I do. I bet every day of the year. There's only two. The rules.
You bet the Final Four. You bet the.
Oh yeah, I bet every day. The 2 rules of gambling are: money management and injuries. And the only two sports I won't bet. I won't bet boxing because I'm not sure about it. And I won't bet horses because they can't tell me they don't feel well.
Director you'd love to work with?
Anyone.
What?
I love working for directors, particularly news guys starting out or girls starting out, because they see things differently than other people do.
Okay. Strangest fan encounter?
Well, the neatest fan was Stan Musial, because he sent me a bat, and it said, from Stan Musial, a great fan. And so that was the neatest one. And the weirdest ones, I don't know, I'd probably see them, were all the people that came up to me and said, you killed I killed John Wayne in the movie The Cowboys, and you killed my buddy. To this day. I said, bud, he smoked, he died of cancer, leave me alone.
You killed him in The Cowboys?
Yeah.
What was he like to work with?
The best. All of those people were the best. The greatest thing my generation and your generation, at least in mine for sure, when we got here to start working, we still had a chance to work with the legends. Mel Allen, I mean, you know.
I worked with Mel, I worked with Red Barber.
Oh, I know.
Miami.
I know.
Secret talent?
None. I mean, I can't think.
Who would you trade places with for a day?
I like my days.
Best decade of your life?
Well, they say it's supposed to be the 50s for us, but I like this decade.
What pisses you off?
Gridlock and child-proofing everything. You can't get a top off.
I hate that.
Oh.
You can't open a bottle.
Oh,
sometimes the cotton is too far in. You can't pull the cotton out.
Oh, my God.
Tell me something people don't know about you.
I had an uncle named Herbert F. Goodrich, who was married my father's sister. He was a judge on the Third Circuit, United States Circuit Court of Appeals. And he wrote a book everybody reads in law school, Goodrich and Kirch, their first year tort law. And he told me once, and I lived with them when I was at Penn in Philadelphia. And he told me once, I said I didn't like he told me to come down and watch a case one day. So I came down, it was a case, Goodyear versus DuPont, about who's responsible for the bad tire, the manufacturer or the designer? Because they had a series of bad tires. And I said, he said, what did you call me, lad? He said, what did you think of today, lad, of what you saw? And I said, I just didn't think it was right. I mean, you never let either lawyer finish. He said, it's not our job to teach litigators in their 30s how to present a case at the second highest court in the land. And he said, beside, every single day that I go to work, I go down to a building where I have a chance to be fair. And that's what I've tried to do all my life, is just be fair.
Bruce will answer your social media questions in our final segment. Do not go away. Don't forget, Bruce Dern is in Chappaquiddick. It's going to do great. April 6th it opens. It'll be a tremendous attention. Before we get into some social media questions, I understand you have a story about Marilyn Monroe.
When I first got in the Actors Studio in New York, Lee Strasberg was a private teacher for Marilyn Monroe, acting teacher, and her confidant who went with her on our locations was Paula Strasberg, Lee's wife. So she would sit in the Actors Studio in the back, never work there because he didn't want her to be subject to what the people would say. So at the end of the first day I was there, she asked me as we walked out, it was drizzling, and she said, you're Gadge being Kazan, you're Kazan's wonderkind, right? And I said, oh God, he doesn't tell people that, does he? He said, oh yeah, he does, so forth and so on. I was supposed to do this movie you're gonna do now, but I have to go do this dumb movie my husband wrote. Well, the husband was Arthur Miller, and the movie was The Misfits, but she didn't want to do it. Because she said two things to me. First thing is, what if he doesn't like me? Meaning Clark Gable. That was the first thing. The second thing was, she said, would you mind walking me across town to 50 Sutton Place? And I said, but it's drizzling. She said, I love that. I said, Miss Monroe, you don't need, you can hail a cab. You don't have to pull your skirt up or anything. They'll just stop and pick you up. So we walk across. As we get across town, just approaching Sutton Place, a woman comes flying out of Sutton Place, hailing a cab on 57th Street, goes by us as close as I am to you, clearly saw us, and we saw her, and she didn't stop and look or anything, got in the cab and was off. As the cab door closed, I looked at Marilyn, and she had tears in her eyes. And I said, what's the matter? She said, Bruce, don't you know who that was? And I said, I have no idea. I mean, she had a polo coat to her ankles, loafers, no socks, slacks, and the coat was open, so she was flying like a big eagle or a bat into the cab. And I turned, we both look up, the cab's now turning the corner, and I turn back, and she's really crying. I'm Brucey from when that guy, I'm not going to put my goddamn hands on Marilyn Monroe, for Christ's sake. So I just said, what's the matter? And then I actually held her, and she says, Bruce. I said, what is it? She says, that was Greta Garbo, and she didn't know who I was. And I said, you know what? I think she shined you on. I think she probably did know who you are. No, she didn't know. And I said, no, I just think you have to say that she just didn't care. And she said, well, what would she have said? She'd just say, honey, they call you Marilyn. They call me Garbo. Stand in f***ing line. That was it.
We have some social media questions. This is official Bruce 25. How was it working with Tom Hanks in The Burbs?
The best. He's the best partner you could have. And
Stone,
he's funny.
he is
and
funny.
he's an Indian fan.
Stonebreakers. What was it like working with the legendary John Wayne and the Cowboys?
He was fabulous. One thing about us, I said when we first came here, we got a chance to work with the legends. He was one. And all of them, with me, it was whether it was Jimmy Stewart or Bob Mitchum or John Wayne, they always encouraged us to go out more on the edge and take risks than they ever did. And they knew we had something about us. John Wayne particularly, the very first day on the Cowboys, because his little kids he has in the movie have to be terrified of me through the whole movie. And then in the end, I come in and kill them in front of all of them. But the first day he comes up to me and he said, I want you to do me a favor. I said, what's that? He said, kick my ass every day in front of these kids in the movie. I don't care what you say to me or anything else, just put me down. I said, why? He said, because they'll be absolutely terrified that you're doing that in front of them and everybody else, and they'll think, oh, my God, who is this guy?
Bear Hill 14, how proud of you of working with your daughter, Laura. She seems to be doing her best work the last 5 years.
Yeah, she's always been good. We have never, ever worked together, ever.
You haven't worked with her?
No.
James Vennington, do you have a special Hitchcock moment?
We did a shot in Family Plot where I had to go into a door and the guy on the light way up in the 40 feet in the air had to show only half my face. After take one, Hitchcock says to him, knew his name, Henry, way the hell up there, are you right-handed or left-handed? And he said, I'm left-handed, Mr. Hitchcock. He said, I thought so. Bruce's face was appearing too much light on it. I wonder if you use your right hand to pull the flap this time and it might not go so quickly. He was right, and they did it.
Bruce, may you live forever. I'll give you a quote you said a couple of years ago.
Oh, God.
The only thing I've hoped for in my career is that people would finally start to realize that I can play.
Yeah, when it's always all my life. I didn't come for anything except to get better as an actor, and I'm still learning, I'm still trying to get better. But when I got my star on the Boulevard, and he says, what does it all mean to you? And I said, well, what it really all means is that a bunch of you folks in Hollywood or somebody got together and said, Bruce Dern could play. So,
you could play, and you play forever.
That's right.
An honor.
And when people say triple doubles and they start talking about what LeBron's doing, Oscar.
Oscar Robertson, lifetime triple-double, right?
Oh.
He's a great sports fan. Thanks to my guest, Bruce Dern. Chappaquiddick is in theaters April 6th. As always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. I'll see you next time.